This week in Pure Reinvention.
You can only travel as fast as that person who's in the back of the area, the back of the trail. So we might need to take something out of their pack. We might need to make sure that they're not getting blisters. We need to think about others first so the whole group can achieve its outcome.
Episode 65, Jeanette Stawski, who is the Executive Director of the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create the space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle fueled by the curiosity, fortified with courage, and activated through practice. Hi, Misty and Will.
Hi, Mike. I'm so excited for listeners to hear this podcast today because I think it is packed with useful information.
Jeanette was a perfect guest, and we're so excited to share this content. I want to spill out all the things that we learned, and I know we've got to wait until the end, Misty.
We do. So we're just gonna ask you guys to listen to Jeanette's competitive spirit and lifelong athleticism and how she translates that into her professional life.
And I'll give everybody a clue. There are so many nuggets that have come up in this interview that we had trouble distilling them down into the best ones. So if you have trouble finding the nuggets, there are a lot of them to look for.
That's right. And you can always visit our website at purereinvention.com and see our quoted moments and the places where we think you should dig into this podcast. If you are short on time and need to get the highlights, go there and find out what we've pulled out for you.
Misty, I want to give a shout out to our friends from Martin Waymeyer, Jody Parker, and Greg Rokiski. We really appreciate the two of you embracing the Pure Reinvention lifestyle. Very much appreciated. Let's listen to Jeanette. This episode is sponsored by Pure Reinvention Starters. If you want to learn how to set yourself apart from other future leaders, this is the place to be. For more information, www.purereinvention.com. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about what your business does?
Yes. So I work for the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education, otherwise known as AORE, and we serve college, university, military, and municipal outdoor recreation and education directors and academics.
And so what is the expected outcome that the association does?
Yeah, so our mission-driven work is to advance the outdoor industry, specifically those who are academically studying the value of outdoor recreation education, and the practitioners who are connecting people, especially 18 to 24-year-olds, to natural spaces.
And what I like about that, and we're going to come back to that, because I think there's a huge connection to the kind of work that you're doing in that space to the business world in terms of what it's teaching us and what it's teaching future leaders.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about you as a person.
Well, again, my name is Jeanette, and I live here in Ann Arbor, Michigan with my husband, Justin, and our two children, Gretel, who's 10, and Thor, who is 7. Two little redheads. My husband and I are both graduates of the University of Michigan, and we met here on the rowing team. So you can't see, but I'm actually 6 feet 2 inches tall, and actually the kids and I were trying to estimate how tall they will be. Gretel might be 6'2" to 6'5", so a redheaded force of wonder in years to come.
For those of us that probably are not quite 5'7", that's a wish that we always had to be a little bit taller. But what's most impressive, though, is something you haven't said yet, and that's about how active your family is.
Well, we do like to be active. Myself, I again was a former athlete here at Michigan, and then now I'm into outdoor swimming. So actually, open water swimming. And actually, this last year, I just swam across the Straits of Mackinac with the first ever Mighty Mac swim. My husband is an avid mountain biker, and he is training for a lot of long distance races. Gretel is a swimmer and a Girl Scout, and Thor is a Tiger Scout in swimming. So we like to be outside and about and doing many different things.
You are living what you're preaching.
That's the plan.
Now, we always start out these interviews with the same 3 questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Of the 5 steps in the reinvention process, which step do you most closely associate yourself with?
Disrupt.
Okay, tell me about that, because you do not look like a disruptor.
I don't. Well, the images can be misleading there, I guess. So, when I review these different steps, or I looked at them, I just thought, where do I like to start? And that is, I have a ability or relentless pursuit to always improve things. And so I think I have incredibly high expectations for myself and those I'm around. And I just think that whatever we're doing, we could always do better. And so I think disruption is kind of where I would always start.
And what is your superpower?
My superpower? That was a very interesting question. I wrote down a couple of different things, but I think I use again the word relentless, but I might go with passion. I think passion is my superpower.
Okay, we're going to come back to that one for sure because that is absolutely part of the fuel of reinvention, isn't it?
That's correct.
And all of us find ourselves in those uncomfortable situations sometimes. So can you describe for us the last time you found yourself in an uncomfortable situation?
I think that's a great question, and the answer is every day. I was thinking about most uncomfortable was the last phone call I had with a board member who needed something that I couldn't provide for them right then, or it was at 5:30 this morning in the swimming pool doing a swim set that I just couldn't breathe and couldn't do. And so there's always a challenge. I love to put myself in a space where I feel like I just have to work a little harder to make it successful.
So let's go back to those 5 steps in the reinvention process. And you immediately picked disruption, and you smile when you say that.
I did.
So disruption to you really means what?
Really, it's looking at where do we want to go? Where's our desired future space? And what do I need to change or improve to get to that space? So it's really a process of saying this works and status quo is okay, but status quo in my mind is irrelevant. And one of the things that's always been a challenge for me, but also an area of growth, is the difference between complacency and consistency. And this has been kind of a growth edge for me throughout my whole history. I always admired people who were consistent, but I loathe people who were complacent.
So how do you start to take what is absolutely unique and powerful to you as an individual professional and start to move that to others?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that is an area for growth for me, right? So that's my opportunity for growth is trying to take the skills that I've been given or have tried to cultivate and try to outwork, outlearn, outgrow myself so I can reach to other people and bring them along.
So give me an example of one of those skills that you have found that has been helpful to you.
Yeah. Let me just think here for a second. Right now, I am currently in graduate school. So I've gone back and I'm currently pursuing my master's on top of some of these other things. And the reason I did that is that I want to be a lifelong learner. I feel like there's no end game here. And so I need to continue to learn new skills, new opportunities, new perspectives so I can be more to everyone. And so I think that would be an example of a time where I just said, well, gosh, I may not have this figured out. And perhaps I need to think more about theory. I've always been a practitioner. And so I can take those things and better relate to my members or those that I serve.
You bring up a really good point, and that is for many of us, we are practitioners and we're used to doing it ourselves. Mm-hmm. At some point, we have to start translating that or transitioning that to others. How do we start to make that change from doing it ourselves to delegating or sharing that knowledge of the journey to other people to inspire in them that next thing I want to talk to you about, which is that passion?
Right. Well, again, another area that I'm continuing to work on, and I definitely don't have it perfected. I think for me, it's just been this continual dissatisfaction with my relationship to others sometimes and trying to encourage them to be more than they currently are. And then starting to realize it's not them, it's me. How can I go further? How can I be better to help bring them along? That they don't know what they don't know. I teach wilderness medicine classes. I had a pretty bad mountaineering accident in 2000 where I was crushed by a boulder and had a whole helicopter evacuation and whatnot. And it just made me realize that I have one opportunity to do these things, to educate, to reach out, to understand that I might be unconsciously incompetent. And that's where I need to kind of reach out to others and say, hey, come along, come join me. But I need to be far enough ahead so I can go back and reach them, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense, because what I heard you say was I needed to reach out and I needed to connect with others and to bring them along. And that's a part of really what you do here with the outdoor recreation, isn't it? Is you talk about how groups of people begin to work together and synchronize and end up doing different things?
That's correct. You're a great listener. So we talked before about what we do on college campuses. What my members do is they take groups of individuals. So again, that 18 to 24-year-old, and we put them in unique spaces, going down a river, climbing a mountain, going into a cave, and only together are they able to have success. So you're only as strong as your weakest person, and it's a lesson in humility and something we call expedition behavior, and that's thinking about the group first before our individual needs. It's about making the pie bigger than trying to fight over a piece of the pie. And so really through an outdoor experience like that, again, it doesn't have to be climbing Everest. It could be a day hike. It could be something. You can only travel as fast as that person who's in the back of the area, the back of the trail. So we might need to take something out of their pack. We might need to make sure that they're not getting blisters. We need to think about others first so the whole group can achieve its outcome.
Okay, this is absolutely mesmerizing to think about. You start out your journey with a certain expectation.
That's correct.
Certain understanding of what you think is going to happen. As you get down the trail with your group, the reality hits.
Mm-hmm.
And you are constantly having to reinvent how you're going to manage that group to successfully get to the end.
Yes.
Now, you used a word, and I've never heard it before, but I'm going to use it a lot now, and I'm going to steal it from you. Actually, it's 2 words. Expedition behavior.
That's correct.
Talk about that.
Maybe another word that might be synonymous would be servant leadership. So thinking about how do I impact this group, instead of thinking about what's in it for me, what is in it for the group first. Expedition behavior could be the simple things like taking some weight for someone's pack, making a hot drink so when they get to camp that they'll have that first, taking the time to make sure that, again, others are cared for so that the whole group can achieve a success they couldn't otherwise do as an individual.
Now, that's not a behavior that everybody just naturally gravitates towards.
That's correct.
Most behavior is that survival mentality of making sure I survive this journey, not worrying about others. How do you start to cultivate those leadership traits in this expedition behavior that you're talking about when most everybody else is just worried about getting through?
Right. Again, you're hitting the nail right on the head. You think this is for me personally. I've navigated a lot of this, both as an athlete, as a coach, as a mother, all these different things. It comes down to role modeling. So I believe of always taking the higher road, always holding myself to a certain standard that I can do and show how I want to be treated or show how I want how others to react or act. In that really it just takes time for people to realize that they will receive theirs and the group will receive theirs. I just have to outlast them.
Well, and it strikes me that leadership is really about how you are able to assume the responsibility of the group and the expedition behavior that goes with the group, because it's a choice you make.
That's
about
correct.
Whether you're worrying about yourself or whether you're worrying about the group, which is the same as whether you're worrying about your board,
right,
or your membership.
That makes me think of another thing that I think nature is so wonderful at, and that is self-responsibility. And again, I mentioned this before that nature always wins. And really what that means is that, the storms come, the rivers rise, things like that happen, but we have to take responsibility for our own actions, our own words, our own equipment, to, again, contribute to that whole. So self-responsibility in a board context means being prepared, having read the documents, having asked the critical questions in advance in an appropriate way so they can serve the members, right? The board is serving the whole. It's not their own individual when they're in that space. They've been elected into that role. You could use that, again, as a parent, as a colleague working in an office space, is I need to be the best at what I can do in my space to contribute to this greater good. Here's
what it seems to me that we tend to do. We tend to function in our own bubble. We tend to function in our own little silo, not thinking that the rest of the world has any connection to us. Yet what you just said was nature always wins. In the marketplace, it's the marketplace always wins. The way the economy behaves will absolutely shape the way our businesses will go. Mm-hmm. Nature always wins.
That's correct.
So what we have to really do is I think I'm hearing you say, as a good leader, is we have to understand how nature or the marketplace behaves so we can interact responsibly or navigate responsibly in it.
I might take it one step further and say, yes, you are correct, but it's also our responsibility as leaders to look ahead and to predict those trends and how we want to behave as an organization. So yes, there are those inputs and those market factors, the economics of it. But again, our role is to be strategic and be disciplined. And so if we're not disciplined and strategic, we can be wayward, chasing after the next bright, shiny object. So again, we have to look at the trends. We have to realize what is happening around us, but then visualize our ideal space and somehow navigate the difference between the two.
You're talking about something that I feel very strongly about, and that is you have to start with the end in mind.
That's correct.
You have to kind of know where you want to go.
That's correct.
Speak a little bit about your experience with groups, expedition behavior, and their understanding of, do they really know where they're going?
That, again, is a great question. So all you can do is you can frame out the expectation or the desired outcome, but then you have to have that dialogue along the way and make sure there's buy-in as the group as a whole. It won't go far, be it a board, be it a team, be it a group of students that you're leading, if everyone isn't on the same page. Now, that's not to say everyone can't have their own opinion and perspective, but you actually have to have that candid conversation of, this is what this means and this is where we're going. going. And again, as a leader, that's an area that I've continued to try to work on, is to be more forthright in that. I think for a long time, I just assumed everyone knew or could see the vision. But I've realized they can't see in my mind or in that space.
And I think that's a great lesson for a lot of leaders. What's maybe painfully obvious to you, that's staring right at you, is not so obvious to a majority of the expedition that you are bringing along behind you. And another thing that I heard you say is I have to constantly be communicating that, because apparently when people get tired or when the weather gets bad, people start to forget.
That's correct. It's also, I guess, in the responsibility and the privilege that comes with leadership also comes the accountability to seeing things that others can't, and articulating that in a way that is palatable, but also drives them to take action. For example, my board and I are currently navigating our budget process, and that's a pretty difficult thing for any executive director or board or staff to do. Well, I've got hundreds of hours into these resources, right, all built to support the outcomes that the board has tasked me with. But however, how do you communicate all of that breadth and depth to that member who's concerned and they want to know where their value that they're getting, or to that first-time attendee who says, what's in it for me? So again, it's kind of balancing those two cultures, being always transparent, but also delivering things within context. That's a huge weight, as well as responsibility, as well as success, I think, for someone in a leadership role.
So walk me through the difference that, as you see it, we've come through a period of time where we actually could benchmark what the expedition was. It was fairly clean, fairly straightforward, and it was always kind of was predictable, right? I'm not sure you would describe the current environment as that way, that
Correct.
the expedition is not so predictable.
Correct.
So how do we have to reinvent the way we lead and think about the expedition, knowing that some of the variables that are coming up, we're not even sure what they are right now?
Right. I come back to what I believe maybe my superpower is, and that's passion. And so going back to that is that I believe so strongly in the work I'm doing in this future space that I can't even see. I mean, I can see glimpses of it, but I just really believe that I can help this board and this association get to this future end state, even though I don't have it all dialed out. Again, the landscape is not perfectly clear in front of me, but I believe in something. I believe in this bigger thing. So then again, as we continue along this path, we just have to give them excerpts or get them to understand that it's much more than where they currently are. That again, status quo is going to become irrelevant. And our job is to help elevate people, programs, and the industry at large to a future space.
You're going after your master's degree now.
That's correct.
How much time do you think you will spend talking about the value of passion?
As far as the degree goes, well, I would say I'm not passionate about the degree at this point. But again, it's all more. I would view this, and this actually might be a great context thing for going. Why would someone like me go after a master's degree when I've been in this space? And it comes back down to lifelong learning, and I think it comes down to, again, just how can I put myself into uncomfortable places to learn from people who have different perspectives. So be it from the professors or the colleagues I have in class, they know things I don't know. It's challenged me to think about how I write, how I communicate, how I can be more effective and serve my members better. That's the whole reason. It's not chasing after a piece of paper or something like that. It's just really saying, gosh, I'm always trying to grow, and that seemed like this last year or two an area to focus on.
So really it became more to you than the content.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. The content, again, I think as I've matured and as I've gone through, again, some of I'm married, I've got 2 small kids, I travel all the time, I swim, I'm on the Letter Winners Board of Directors, I volunteer, who in their right mind would take on a master's degree right now? And again, it truly is because I needed more so I could give more.
That becomes your fuel.
That's correct.
So what becomes really, really important, and I'm going to guess you're going to say this, is to ask people the question, where do they get their fuel? So, I mean, in watching you talk about what you get by doing this, what you get is the fuel you need to go on. Mm-hmm. And how important is that for other people to get that same kind of fuel? It
makes me think about my opportunity to address my membership at last year's annual conference. I was speaking right before Nicole Stott. We had a female astronaut be our speaker.
Oh, how cool.
Talk about expedition behavior in space where there truly is no safety net. But I thought about that fuel and the propulsion to move forward. And the question I asked the membership is I asked them, where do they see themselves in 3 to 5 years? Are they consciously aware of who and what they want to be? And if they haven't asked themselves that question, how could you ever create a path to success? If you don't think of where you want to go, then you can't break apart the tenets to get there. It's just going through the motions then. So I guess that's the fuel, is saying, I want to be the best executive director I could possibly be to serve the AORE. What are the things I need to do? How do I get better? Not for me, but for the members. It's all about the members.
You know, Mike, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've heard a podcast guest speak so clearly about intentionally putting the focus on putting themselves in uncomfortable positions.
Well, first of all, Misty, we've learned that rarely are you wrong. You are usually right. And I think that is such a phenomenal way to look at growth.
It is. When she said that, I was just like, wow, yes, good for you for seeking that out, because I know how difficult it is for a lot of people.
I think Jeanette, as an athlete, truly understands why when you put yourself into a uncomfortable space or you put yourself into a stressful experience, that's really how you become stronger. And she has dedicated her professional career to becoming stronger. And it is so impressive to watch someone on that journey.
Let's spend some time talking about that great new phrase she gave us, expedition behavior.
I had never heard that before, had you?
That was news to me.
Expedition behavior has just intrigued me ever since Jeanette has introduced me to it, because when you think about whether you're on a journey by yourself or whether you're on a journey with a group, what Jeanette has reminded leaders around the world of is that you are responsible for the group. And even though you may be working on your own behavior has to have a positive impact on the group and your ability to assess how well the expedition is doing, thus the expedition behavior.
Yeah, I think she's used the analogy, it's about making the pie bigger, not fighting over a slice.
Absolutely. I think sometimes leaders get into this space where they're only worried about the recognition they get for themselves. And I think Jeanette was talking about the fact that when, as a leader, you can put others first, and you can begin to recognize what the expedition behavior not only is, but then as a leader, how to respond to it. When is the leader when you're going down a trail, and when is the first person need to be replaced with the next person so that you continually have kind of a refreshed viewpoint? Everybody has a chance to do their part. Everybody's engaged. Everyone has a role. And here's the part I like best of all, is I think when you really get to be good with expedition behavior, everybody's looking out for everybody else.
Exactly. And what she talked about, if you're on a hike, you might have to help somebody take something off of their pack and put it on yours. And what a great example for the workplace. Workloads vary. Sometimes people say yes to more than they can fully process within deadlines. And there are other people who might need more work to do. And finding out what you can carry of somebody else's pack makes such a difference in a team environment.
We promised our listeners there'd be so many nuggets in this, and so the next one I had really focused on was something that Jeanette said about accountability to action.
Oh yeah,
and Misty, that falls exactly in the thing that you were talking about, because if you recognize, right, that there's somebody's pack that has to be lightened or some sort of a shift in responsibilities within your group, do you actually do it? Are you actually making yourself accountable to the action that is necessary from the feedback from your group?
That's huge.
It is so important for a leader to be able to assess the needs of the group, assess the activities that are going on, and then put themselves into an accountable position to then impact whatever is next.
And I think Jeanette is doing that. It sounds like she's doing it from what she's described in this short podcast we had with her. And I liked what she said about taking on the challenge to outgrow herself. And as true leaders wanting to do that, that's how you outgrow yourself, is you put yourself in those positions and take on and learn from each other and see where you can be of service.
And she does it in such a balanced way. Jeanette was very firm about recognizing that nature always wins. So in the marketplace, right, the marketplace is always going to win. So as a leader, as an expedition leader, how are you making sure you're respecting nature as you go on your journey, recognizing those things which you can have influence on and recognizing those things which you cannot have influence on, and being a part of the total, not the total.
That's huge, and that's a perfect takeaway for what Pure Reinvention tries to show you how to do, and what we try to model as leaders every day.
Misty, this has been a phenomenal conversation.
Remember, if you're ready to make a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.